Welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast, sponsored by the Draft Professors. Joined with me today is Draft Professor JT Olson. We're going to be diving into some tight ends here in a few minutes. But JT, it's Friday, time to relax. How you doing?
I'm doing okay. A cold is working its way through my house right now, so I'm the last one to get it. It's finally got its way down to me after going through my kids and my wife. So I'm kind of dragging a little, but we're here. We're a week away from winter break, and life is good.
Well, and it's actually better. Like, this is the time if you're going to get a cold or whatever going through the house. It's this time because now your immune system is going to be at peak operating efficiency for Christmas
Oh, we'll
week.
see. I feel like anytime my kids catch anything, they get it, and then I get it twice as bad, whatever they had.
Oh, well, I feel for you. My kids are a little bit older, so they don't bring home as much, and they also live with their mother more than they live with me. So I tend to be in some type of bubble. My immune system probably doesn't get tested as much as it did when they were younger. But
Yeah, when all they
yeah,
do is stick their fingers up their nose and touch everything.
yeah. So this was your first real dive into the tight end class, correct?
Yeah. I hadn't got around to the tight end early on in the process, but tight end is definitely on my radar this draft cycle. Covering the Bucks, they just scored their first touchdown last night from a tight end this season, so tight end is definitely a position that I've been meaning to get around to and finally got a chance to this past week.
Yeah. So I asked that. I think I already knew the answer, but I asked that on air. So this is JT giving his first look or first impression, and I think I sent him 13 tight ends, and there were two blocking tight ends that he's told me he didn't get to backstage. So JT is really just gonna kind of chat through the tight end class. But the first tight end that I wanted to hear about was DJ Rogers from SMU, and that's because the last time we podcasted on him, it was so early his grade was incomplete. Um, Now that he's played most of the season, what do you think of DJ Rogers?
So DJ Rogers is an interesting one. He's got a good build, 6'4", 250, so he's got that size that you want in your tight end. I thought he was pretty fluid for that size, actually. So that was something that stood out right away, was how well he moved, being, a bigger body tight end, having that girth to him. I like his long speed. I think he's a good athlete. I think it's a little bit of build-up speed. I don't think he's as explosive or quick as he is fast. But I think, if you're looking for a guy who can stretch the field a little bit, threaten the seam a little bit, I think he has the tools to do that. So I liked his speed overall. The one thing I didn't like is I thought he was kind of passive. His blocking, it was underwhelming. I thought there were times where he just didn't look overly interested in it. And I thought there were other times where the ball was there and I just didn't see that pit bull mentality to go up and take the ball. So just kind of watching the tape, he came off as a little more passive than I thought he could. I don't think maybe it's just the way he's utilized at TCU, but I think he does not maximize his athletic talents as much as I think they could. I think his best routes are within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage. He kind of flips himself and presents himself, but it's very basic. There's nothing that really screams this is a mismatch in the NFL. But he is so fluid. He can run that little crosser over the middle and just flip himself and make himself available, and that looks really good when he does that. But overall, for a guy who I think has athletic tools, I don't see them translating in terms of separation and explosiveness like I think they could be.
And that's interesting because that was actually some of what was said about him the last time. Is that, first of all, DJ Rogers at SMU is probably in the wrong offense for his skills. He's not one of the top two options on that team, right? SMU has two really good wide receivers that are going to get draftable grades.
Was
So at
was he
minimum,
was he SMU or TCU?
oh, excuse me, it was TCU. You're right.
Okay,
You're right. It was
I was gonna say
TCU. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I was
yeah,
not
yeah.
familiar with these options.
I had the wrong. I had the wrong two consonants before the U. That was my mistake. I don't have. But anyway, so for TCU, there are two really good draftable wide receivers on that team, and like Jordan Dwyer next year at wide receiver, it will not surprise me if he gets a top 50 grade. So one of the wide receivers in TCU is going to be one of the better wide receivers in the country next year. And then the other wide receiver at TCU is very draftable this year. So he's at best option 3 in the offense. And then to your point, the way he's used doesn't match the athletic traits that others see on film. So, we don't have combine or 40 time. So all the athleticism that's being described, JT, you saw it on film, right? There's athleticism there that you like, correct?
Oh yeah, being super fluid. I think the long speed is there. I wouldn't say he's someone who jumps off as super twitchy. Some of these tight ends looked a little quicker than he did, but I think in terms of size, mobility, long speed, he's got tools for sure.
So out of the 11 tight ends, I think that you got to. I have the feeling he's going to be closer to 11 than he is going to be 5 for you. But how high or low was he on that list of 11?
So I didn't actually put him on my board for some reason, but I think kind of looking at the guys around him, I would say right now for me of my 11 or 10 that I got to, he's probably tight end 8.
Yep. Okay. And for a player, like, nobody was talking about DJ Rogers of TCU during summer scouting. That was a player like I was watching the first game of the season, which was North Carolina against TCU. He made several good blocks. I saw him make a couple of good catches. And I then say, okay, who is this player? And, I start doing, okay, he's a senior. I checked, all the different tight end boards that people did during the summer, and he wasn't on them. Okay, so, check. And everybody said, okay, well, we have to watch him because he doesn't really have any. I don't believe he had too much tape the previous 3 seasons. But where do you want to go with the tight end discussion next? You want to start at tight end 1 and work your way down?
Sure. I mean, it's a great tight end 1. I really like this tight end 1 in this class.
So is that Kenyon Sadiq for you?
It is absolutely Kenyon Sadiq for me. Love Kenyon Sadiq.
So he's my default pick for the Buccaneers in a mock draft if he's available.
And I think he's someone the Bucs would be very, very interested in because the player he reminds me of, I know they were very interested in when that player came out.
So who does he remind you of?
He reminds me a lot of Sam Laporta.
Okay.
So, and that's someone who's been an all-pro and, I think very highly of Sadiq. I don't think he's quite a Brock Bowers kind of prospect, but I think he's, that next tier down as someone who projects as a Pro Bowler, potentially an all-pro. Really, really like him. 6'3", 245, versatile move tight end. He can play in the wing. He can play in the slot. I don't love him in line. I think he just lacks a little bit of girth. He just lacks that in-your-face attitude to bang with defensive linemen. But in terms of move blocking, I think he does a really nice job squaring people up in space. I think he gets to the second level really well and finds work pretty easily. He's super light on his feet. What really impressed me, this is a pass catcher. I'm going to talk a lot about blocking because, I love blocking. But this is a pass catcher. His body control is excellent. He has a great feel for tempo and how to find space and zone coverages. This is just someone who has a natural feel for the game, and you can really see it when he plays. His hands, I thought, were really, really good. And really, this is just nothing but positive down the board. The only thing, I don't think people will love if you're looking for that Rob Gronkowski who you want to line up on a defensive end and push him around in the running game. That's not who Sadiq is, but that's fine. Most tight ends aren't that in the league anymore. So sign me up for Kenyon Sadiq all day.
Okay, and then who was the second best tight end on the list of 11 that you watched?
So the next one, it's kind of a tier of 3, and right now for me, tight end 2 is Max Clare.
Okay, and that's Max Clare's Ohio State, correct?
Correct. Let me pull up my notes on him here. All right. So kind of a similar size, a little bit longer than Sadiq, but 6'5" and 243, 245. Another guy just like Sadiq. He's a really good move blocker. He extends his arms well. He maximizes his length. He finds work in space really well. When he goes in motion, when he pulls, he really just locks onto his man and doesn't let him go. I thought he was really, really good in that way. Better than Sadiq even. This was a plus blocker in terms of that move blocking kind of skill set. Again, not a Rob Gronkowski. You're not going to line him up and have him bang with 275-pound defensive linemen. Although he is feisty, he could do that to a degree. But this is a guy who's going to really do well in the NFL. Put in motion, used in pulls, getting into space on the second level. He's got a really good skill set for that. I think he's a good athlete. I don't think he's super explosive, but I do think he's a good athlete. Really natural pass catcher. A lot of times we talk about really good blockers, which I think he is, and they're guys like Ko Kieft. He's this pseudo fullback with stone hands. Clare is not that at all. He's got really nice hands. I thought he caught the ball very naturally, and I thought his routes looked really smooth. So I don't think he's featured very much in Ohio State's offense for obvious reasons with who they have there. But I think in terms of skill set, this is a guy who's going to play 10, 12 years in the league. He's going to be a rock solid tight end. He does all the little things you want, all the run game support you want. And he's just going to be that super reliable target. He's going to find ways to get open, find ways to move the chains. I really like his skill set overall.
Awesome. So who else was in the same tier as Max Clare? And was it Michael Trigg and Oscar Delp?
Yes, it was actually in that order.
Okay. Well, you see, and it's cool to begin to see consensus as to how people see the tight end class. So you said that you like Delp more than Trigg.
Trigg more than Delp, actually.
I'm sorry, Trigg more than Delp. So what do you like about Michael Trigg, the tight end from Baylor?
So as much as I, love to talk about blocking, Trigg is not that guy. He's 6'4", 240, so he's a little on the lighter side for a tight end. Flirting with those 230 numbers, which, that kind of makes you a certified pass catcher. But in terms of pass catchers, Trigg can be kind of special in terms of tight ends. He's got huge hands. He can catch everything. He has some focus drops, but in terms of catch radius, because he's got super long arms, there's nothing that he can't go up and get. There's nothing he can't dig out of the dirt. In terms of circus catches, Trigg can do all of it. Like in my notes, I describe him as George Pickens as if he were a tight end and not a psychopath. So if you are looking for someone who can go up and make plays on the football and make those spectacular catches, and that's super valuable in those congested areas like the red zone, I think Trigg is going to be a really good player, potentially special in that way. He's physical down the field. He doesn't push off, but he will box you out. He will make you work to try and get that ball. So I really like what he is with the ball in the air. He will go up, he will get it, and that is his ball. He could be more sharp with his routes, but I like his athletic tools. I think he can just really snap his routes off a little bit more to create a little bit more separation so he doesn't always have to make those awesome catches. But I think he's a good athlete and just needs to polish that part of his game up a little bit. But more than anything, he is going to rely on his wingspan, his hands, his size to make those tough catches and be that touchdown scorer in those hard to move the ball area.
Okay, and then Oscar Delp was the third tight end in that tier.
Yes, Delp, really liked Delp. Different player, different skill set, but I think he is a very high upside player. 6'5", 245, and I thought Oscar Delp was the most impressive athlete that I watched. He's got legitimate juice for a big guy like he is. He extends his arms well. He locks horns as a blocker. He's got good strength. Not a people mover by any means. Like, this is not a pseudo offensive tackle, but he can hold his own up there. So, guys like Sadiq or guys like Claire, those are more move blockers. Delp can get a little bit more gritty with what he does. So I like that if you're looking for more of an inline guy. This is someone who I'm not saying he will be this player, but he's more of that George Kittle mold to me. Looks like a really good athlete. He's a good blocker. I think he could have a better pro career than he did even a college career in terms of production. And I thought his hands were good. So I think this is someone who has a lot of potential. He's someone who can improve his route running. I don't think he creates a ton of separation at this point in his career. I think his routes are a little bit sloppy, but I think he's got the athletic tools to be a good route runner. That's just an area of his game that needs to be polished a little bit more. So this is someone who I think goes a little bit later, but I think is someone who's going to inevitably outperform his draft position.
Nice. So that's 4 of the, I believe you told me you got to 11 of the tight ends when we were backstage. So that's 4 of the 11 tight ends. So who is the 5th tight end? And I'm going to call that tight end the best of the rest. And I'm curious how big the tier is that your 5th tight end is in.
I'm trying to decide how many are in this next tier. At least 2. And then maybe 2 more. And I think I can't decide if I want to break this up into 2 tiers or if it's just all one big tier of 4 guys. But my next tight end is Eli Raridon.
Raridon from Notre Dame, right?
Yeah, from Notre Dame. Big guy. So let me see.
So what do you like about Raridon?
So the thing that stands out first and foremost is his size. Listed 6'7". He was the biggest tight end of this group, 250. But really what popped for me was how well he moved at that size. He's got quickness. He's got legitimate quickness to his game. For a big body, this guy is super nimble. So that stood out right away. I think he has potential to be a really good route runner because of that. And I think that's another thing that could be polished up. I think that was a theme for a lot of these tight ends. Their route running could be a little bit more crisp, a little tighter. But the way he moves at his size, I have no reason to believe he can't get there with it. He uses his size well as a blocker. This is someone who I think is a good blocker. He does a nice job down blocking and sealing things off. He will help generate space for a running back. And I think he could even improve a little bit more in that area, because he has the length, he has the mass to push people around. But I think just technically, I think he could roll his hips a little bit more, kind of generate that power and maximize his size a little bit more than he does. And I think he could just, be a little bit more physical when he's on the move. When he's using a pole, just pop his guy in the chest a little bit. And I think that's hard for a guy who's 6'7", to really get low and get into your opponent's chest when you're running at full speed. But that's something I think could be improved a little bit. But this is a guy who I think he's a good blocker. He has good athletic tools. And I think he's someone who could work his way as a fringe starter down the line. And it just depends on how much he develops those little things, that route running, those blocking, techniques, some fundamental stuff. How much can he improve with that to maximize the gifts that he has?
Okay. And that was Eli Raridon from Notre Dame. And you said there's at least one other tight end that you have graded really close to Raridon.
Yeah. So the other one who I think is pretty close to him is Daquan Wright from Ole Miss. Let me-
Okay. And what did you like about Daquan Wright?
So, excuse me. So I think he does a nice job using his arms and extending his arms as a blocker. He is a guy who has some weight to him. He's 6'4", 255. And I do think he uses his length and his size to his advantage well. I think he has some good speed. He is someone who I think can threaten the middle of the field pretty well. Um, but the thing about him that is kind of a double-edged sword, that speed is good, but he's an athlete who comes off as someone who's pretty high cut with really long legs, which makes him less than super quick. He's not someone who's super twitchy from what I saw. But if you let him get ahead of steam, he's got good speed to run by linebackers and makes life difficult for safety. So if you get him going, he's got the speed to make you pay. I just think it's a little bit harder to build up with those long legs, and he just doesn't have that natural, that like Oscar Delp. He's quick, he's twitchy. Daquan Wright is not that. He's fast, but I don't think he's quick. But I think he's someone, he lines up, he can play a lot of wing, he can play inline, he can play slot. He's someone he will stick his man in space, he will give him a good pop. I just think he's kind of a unique athlete because he is so high cut. But from what I saw on film, there was a lot of things I really liked with him. I question a little bit how that athleticism will translate because he looked like a different athlete than what a lot of these guys were.
Different as a negative or different as a positive?
I
Or
can't
just
say yet. Like,
okay, got it.
at
Okay.
the college level, it played, and I think it's good. Because that speed is good, and you don't have to be super twitched up to create separation at the college level necessarily. But bigger, faster, stronger league, I don't know if it'll play as well. I think the speed will play, if you let him get downfield. But if you're trying to do a lot of that quick outbreaking stuff or, just those quicker routes, he might not be as good at that at the NFL level.
Okay. And then you said that you weren't sure if it was a tier of two and a tier of two or a tier of four. So who are the next two tight ends that you have after Raritan and Wright?
So I haven't decided the order because I'm this next one it's probably the one I'm least familiar with. I was still watching some film on him, but it's Jack Endries out of Texas.
Yep.
All right, Endries. We'll go with that.
Endries. I'm sorry, I didn't realize you were looking for a pronunciation clarification. Jack Endries is the way
No,
that I.
I think that's just the first time I actually read his name. And, because, I'm going through my notes and I'm just like, okay, the Texas tight end. And I just type it while, reading it, seeing the letters. And I'd never actually stopped to read it. So I'm just kind of like, is that Endry? But yeah, I thought he's someone who looked kind of similar to what I thought about Claire, just a little bit lesser version. I liked his blocking. I thought he was someone, he is a good refined blocker. I thought he rolls his hips well, he extends his arms well, which can maximize his tools, generate some push at the point of attack. I think he squares up well. I don't know if he has the natural power that I would want. 240 is a little bit leaner for a tight end. But he is someone who I think it looks really good at the college level. I think he's pretty refined for where he's at, more so than some of these other guys. And I thought athletically, I thought he looked pretty smooth, pretty fluid. I think a lot of the things I think about Clark, where I think this is someone who can be very reliable, very, safety blanket, move the chains, maybe not spectacular, but a guy who can be a rock solid contributor. I think Endries has all the capability to do that. So he's one I'm still trying to get a firm feel for. But I think he's a similar mold to a guy like Max Clare.
Okay. And ironically, when we were just coming out of summer scouting, that was like it was Claire and Andres and Delp were the three that were highest in the summer And then there were people that would comment about Sadiq, but I don't believe that there was as much film on him, and we had to wait and see Sadiq actually put it on the field. So what you're saying about Andres and Claire, that was a lot of what the talk was in the summer. So that makes a lot of sense to me that you would have explained it that way.
And I could see why those three, they're all kind of a similar profile. Good blockers, good athletes. Think they could be, steady contributors in the passing game. Yeah, I think they have decent upside as a, not a guy you build an offense around by any means, but a guy who's a part of an offense. So I think those kind of guys, they're all in a similar mold for sure.
Yep. And then who was in the same tier as Andres? Who was the other tight end that you had there?
My other one was Justin Jolly from NC State.
Okay.
So there's something here with him. I do like him. I think top to bottom, this is a fairly good tight end class. Maybe not super great at the top, but I think I like the depth of this class, at least to this point. 6'3", so a little bit shorter, and he's 250, so he's got, kind of a squattier build for a tight end. But at the same time, I thought he was pretty fluid for that size. I thought he flipped the hips well, and he could present himself pretty similar to DJ Rogers, who I talked about earlier. My cat just ran into a door. I thought he was hit and miss as a blocker, though. Sometimes it looked good, and there were other times I questioned if he really was interested in it. So with a guy who is that thicker, squattier frame for a tight end, you really want that guy to be a good blocker. And I just wasn't overly impressed with Jolly in that way. And I thought he had some drops with some contested passes. Again, 6'3", probably doesn't have the longest arms. And I think that showed up on tape a little bit. So that was a concern I had with him. But he's another one. He lines up in line, the slot, the wing. So he's got some versatility in what you can do with him. I thought he was a fairly good athlete. I don't think he's dynamic by any means necessarily. But, I think for a guy who's 6'3", 250, I thought he was a better athlete than I would have expected him to be. And I thought he did have a good body control to him, even though if he, had some competition for the pass, he would drop it occasionally or just not come down with it. I did think he could adjust to the ball fairly well and does have a decent catch radius. So there's something here. I don't know if his size, his frame matches up with his skill set as a blocker and someone who can make contested catches.
Okay, and who is in, I'm going to say, the best of the rest tier that you have? Because I think at this point you've gone through 7 of the 11 tight ends, right?
I think I've gone through 9.
And maybe you've gone through 9, and I missed.
I think I've only got 2 more left.
Okay, and who are the 2 that you have left?
My next one is Joe Royer from Cincinnati.
Okay. That's one of Ryan Sparks' guys. Ryan Sparks is a huge fan of any player that went to the University of Cincinnati.
Oh, no. I don't know if he's one of my guys, I'll be honest. I kind of see him as he's kind of just a guy to me. He doesn't pop off the screen as an athlete. He's kind of someone who's trying to get in your way as a blocker more than impose his will. I think his tools are okay. I think he's fairly fluid. I think his speed is okay. I think he catches it fairly well. But there's nothing that really stands out that makes him special. And I think if he maximizes everything that he could ever be, he'll be someone like Cade Otton, someone who could start, but is, someone you're potentially looking to upgrade over. I didn't think he was a mismatch as a pass catcher or as a blocker, but he's not worthless in either area either. He's not undraftable by any means. He didn't move the needle for me.
Got it. And then would you say that the other tight end in that tier didn't move the needle either?
I would say the last tight end I had is someone I had expectations for, and he underwhelmed me. And maybe that's my own bias influencing where he's at right now. But I was really excited to watch this last one. Was Eli Stowers from Vanderbilt, and he was one who I was excited to watch. I wanted to really like, one, because I like any player who goes to Vanderbilt, and two, he's 6'4" and 230, and that's the kind of mold that I'm looking for in the scouting process. I'm looking for that, that mismatch pass catcher, because that's, the team I cover. That's what they're probably going to be looking for. And, that's what Stowers is. He is not that inline blocker. He's someone who will throw a shoulder, but not much more. That's not what you're drafting him for, is to block. He is someone, he's a good route runner. He presents himself over the middle well. He's good on the comebacks and in the flats. And he can threaten the seam a little bit. But I think relative to what I was expecting at his size, 6'4", 230, I just didn't think he was the athletic mismatch I expected him to be. I thought defenders stuck with him fairly well. I thought this is the mold of player I want, but I don't know if Eli Stowers is quite the player I wanted him to be. So, I mean, I think right now he's a backup at best as just a change of pace pass catcher. But right now he's an undersized, non-blocking tight end who doesn't separate as well as I want him to, and I just don't love that combination overall. So, maybe I'll be proven wrong at the combine. Maybe he does test as like a top-tier athlete, because that's what I thought he was going to be and what I expected him to be. But right now, from the couple of games I've watched, I did not see that as much as I was expecting.
So where does DJ Rogers compare to Royer and Stowers for you?
I'd say Rogers is in that same tier. I'd put him a little bit above Royer right now.
Got it. And it sounds like it's the athletic upside of Rogers is almost what's winning that. Is like, I'm just listening to you describe the players. It sounds like to me that you like Rogers' athleticism more than Stowers, for example.
Yeah, I'd say that's true. And I think I like Royer better as a blocker. But, these are guys. Rogers is an upside. I think Royer is a limited ceiling, and Stowers is something I really haven't figured out yet. So I think it is that athletic upside that puts Rogers ahead of those guys.
Yeah, and I think Stowers, it's worth maybe a slightly extended conversation because, for example, like I posted a Bills mock draft, and Stowers was there in round 5, and I said, well, if he's there in round 5, is he BPA? And a couple of people in the chat said Stowers won't be there around 5. And I said, well, because like that particular person had Stowers graded way higher. And I said, when I'm listening to the draft professors, I haven't heard too many that are high on Stowers. Right? Like, because as I'm listening to you describe, Stowers is a good prospect for rounds 5 through 7. But I don't know that he's worthy of a top 4 pick for somebody because he's a project. You're not getting a player that's going to be able to come in and give you starting snaps as a rookie. So you have to find a way to get him on the field as a tight end too. And he's going to be limited into what types of sets or down and distance you play him in because he's not a short yardage tight end. Right. He's going to need to be on the field in a passing situation. So, like, I see and I've heard the scouting report you gave on Stowers. That was what Max gave. That is what Sam Teets gave. That's what James Foster wasn't on that podcast. That's what EJ gave and Anthony Russo gave.
Well, I'm glad I lined up with them because, again, Stowers is one I wanted to like. The mold is what I was looking for. So I felt like I might be too harsh with my evaluation because he underwhelmed me relative to what I wanted him to be. So I'm glad there's some consistency in that opinion.
So I'm going to kind of shift conversations and ask you a couple questions about the Buccaneers. And
Sure.
I'm ignorant. I probably could not name 10 players on the Buccaneers roster. So I'm going to ask you a couple questions about their tight end room. So what tight ends does Tampa Bay currently have under contract for 2026?
So right now, I believe they'll have Payne Durham, who is their backup. He is basically a non-factor in the passing game this year. He's a non-athletic red zone target / blocker who isn't a great blocker. And then behind him, they have what's his name? I want to say Delp, but I want to say Oscar Delp, but that's obviously not who it is. He caught a touchdown last night, and I cannot think of his name in this moment to save my life.
Give me a minute. So I probably should just go to the NFL. So I'm on PFF on my other monitor. Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This is the roster. Oh, it does. Look at that. Okay, so
Devin Culp.
Devin Culp. Oh, that is. It's Devin Culp.
Yeah, and I had Oscar Culp in my head. Delp. Oscar Delp, yep. Devin Culp. I can see where I got confused there.
Right.
But he's basically been a non-factor for 2 years. He tested really well at the combine. He's a good athlete, but this is his second year in the league, and he had maybe a handful of catches last year. I think last night he had his first catch, which was the touchdown, which was cool. But he was someone he never produced at Washington when he was there, and he hasn't really produced in Tampa despite his athletic tools. So I think he'll be on the roster, but I wouldn't be surprised if he was cut. And then they have Ko Kieft, who is a blocking-only tight end, who is a really good special teams player. He is a really good, fullback, inline blocker. He is a great glue tight end if you're looking for that niche. He's been hurt a lot of the year, but he's someone who I believe is still under contract next year. If not, I would expect him to be re-signed for a minimal deal because he's really good at that specific role.
Yep. So, Anthony, to answer your question, so JT said he wanted to cover tight ends. I gave him the 13 tight ends that graded highest when we did scouting reports. John Michael Gillenberg was not on the list of 13. So, therefore, he wasn't on the list that I gave JT, and JT only got to 11 of the 13 tight ends on the list. So, we'll have to punt the thoughts on John Michael Gillenberg, but I can tell you from conversations with the other draft professors, right now they have John Michael Gillenberg around a round 5-6 grade. So that's about the range that they would be saying. So it's a mid-day 3 level players where the grade is. And my understanding is, well, no, I don't even want to say that because I haven't heard what the scouting report is on Gillenberg yet. Okay, so JT, so the reason why I asked you, okay, what tight ends are under contract? So with the description that you gave, it sounds like there's a middling blocking tight end on the roster, but I didn't hear you really say that there was a tight end that you could throw to. So that was why you biased the watch towards the players that could catch when I said these two guys profile as blockers. Those are the two guys that you didn't watch. And that it makes perfect sense to me as to why.
Well, I'll be honest, that was just dumb luck. I didn't know who was who, or they were just names on a sheet to me. And you said they were blocking tight ends. I'm like, oh, that works out because that's not what I'm really profiling for anyway.
Yep. So, yeah, so lucky us. So a couple of other things. I think rookie tight ends are fool's gold is the wrong way to describe it, but you need to be really careful with rookie tight ends and what your expectations are, even if they're drafted in round 1. So recently, like Brock Bowers had a huge year as a rookie, but you can't measure, even if Sadiq goes in round 1, you can't expect Sadiq to even put up 50% of the stats that Bowers did as a rookie. So the stat that I like to give is look at like what Mike Ditka did as a tight end as a rookie. Okay, keep in mind, Mike Ditka is close to 90 years old because I think he stopped playing before I was born. And I'm old. Right? Okay. So Mike Ditka held the rookie tight end receiving record until Sam Laporta and Brock Bowers. Okay. So Sam Laporta, Brock Bowers, and Mike Ditka are like the best rookie tight end years. And you would take any of their rookie years. If you had a veteran tight end and they got those stats, you would love them. But most tight ends, like if a tight end, I'd have to go back and look it up, but if a tight end got 400 yards receiving as a rookie, they're making the top 25 list of all-time seasons by a tight end. Right? You got to keep the bar low because tight ends, you have to know how to block, you have to know how to catch, and you might be coming into the league deficient in one of those, which may keep you off of the field. Right. Because some of it is, okay, you know, if it's short yardage and you can't block, they're going to bring somebody else on, like a extra offensive tackle or something like that. So if your team is drafting a tight end and you're expecting things out of a rookie, I would just say lower the expectations, even if they're taken in round one. You know, even if they're taken where God, I was trying to think of who the tight end that was taken high last year was.
I can't think who. I'd have to go back and check my notes.
Yeah.
What my
So
tight end big board looked like last year.
There was a tight end that was taken high last year. We can't remember who he is because he's just.
Oh, I know who it is.
Who is it?
It's Tyler Warren and Colston Loveland.
Yes. So I haven't looked at Tyler Warren's stats. I've seen him play. I've seen him catch touchdowns, but he's not. Oh yeah, and then Colston Loveland as well. So thanks, Ryan. So yeah, so like Loveland and Warren, you can see that they're good players. You can see they belong in the league, but they're not dominating yet. Just give your young tight ends time, even if they're drafted in round one. They're not going to necessarily come out of the gate and set the league on fire. Yep. Thanks, Ryan. And that's exactly my point, right? Because when they're a veteran tight end, you're going to want them to have, 1,000, 1,200 yards. Whether or not they get that as rookies, I would just say keep the expectations low. So I see that JT had to hop off camera here for a minute. So
yeah, I'm still here. I just had to turn my camera off for a second. Passing traffic.
No, understood. Shared space. I podcast from the corner of my room, but there's people like all off to the side and stuff. So, okay. So JT, what is next as you're building your board? What's next for you?
Let's see. Looking at my board now, I haven't touched quarterbacks yet, and that's probably where I'll go next. Wide receiver is pretty scarce. Safety is pretty scarce. So one of those three positions is where I'm going to look next. As I try and slowly round out my board and kind of solidify a top 50, kind of get those big names in all those positions.
So is 11 players a reasonable number for you to watch in a week?
Yeah, I'd say mostly.
Okay. Why don't we do safeties?
Cool.
Okay. So Ryan Sparks, I see that you're in the chat. Anthony, I see that you're in the chat. Feel free to drop a safety in, but I'm going to drop in.
So I've watched three so far. I've watched Caleb Downs, Xavier Scott, and Amari Farrell.
Right. And Scott and Farrell, I think, is going back. I don't think
okay.
Right. So I believe he's an underclassman. So Caleb Downs and Emmanuel McNeil Warren. And have you watched Jalen Kilgore yet?
Yes, I have him as a linebacker, kind of nickel player.
Okay. Love it. So Downs, Warren, Kilgore, AJ Halsey. Okay. And then there's Michael Taff, Texas.
Who's that safety out of? I know there's one out of USC and one out of Oregon.
Dylan Thieneman is the one out of Oregon.
I think one's like Lassiter.
Kamari Ramsey.
Ramsey.
You had the right first name. Kamari Lassiter is a corner for the Texans.
Okay. So I'm just thinking of just old random draft prospects.
Okay. So Ryan Sparks put Jalen Catalon and Cole Wisniewski into the chat. I'm going to tell you the draft professors have those guys graded so low that they're not going to make the list of 11. Sorry, Ryan. Okay. So we have Hall. Okay. Oh, and you need to get the guy from Maryland. Jalen Husky. So he's a corner that converted. And then Keon Sabb and Hubbard. Is it Bray Hubbard? Yep.
Oh, and those are Alabama?
Those are Alabama, yep.
I remember watching them when I did the Alabama-Georgia preview. I didn't do like a full profile on them or anything, but I remember number 18 stood out to me.
Yep. So I didn't count them. So I am going to pull up, and why not share? Because I can promote my site while we podcast. I like doing that. Okay, so let's do rankings, safeties, flip this to safeties, and we have to count to 11. Okay, Downs, Thieneman. I'm looking for McNeil Warren. There he is.
And that's the Toledo kid, right?
Correct.
I can tell you already that I want to like him because I'm always trying to represent the MAC.
Yep. 7. Husky is 8. Hubbard is 9. Sabb is 10. We can add one more. Okay. So there's a draft professor cult on Bud Clark from TCU. I'm going to give you Zakee Wheatley.
All right.
So there are people that really like Bud Clark, but Wheatley's probably going to grade higher from a consensus standpoint. But if you wanted a 12th, it's going to be Bud Clark. There's just too many people that like him.
I'll come back and listen to this episode if I get to a 12th tight end or a safety.
Yeah. So I'll end up taking this graphic and I'll post it into the chat so that you have the list. While I didn't necessarily put them in order, like I think Husky is going to grade higher than being 8. And if you have Kilgore as a linebacker, you may, like, I'm curious if you had to compare Kilgore and Halsey, how would you do it? If you had to compare Kilgore and Ramsey, how would you do it? Because all of them would be like either box or slot as to how, like, what their NFL position would be. So I would be curious. Not all these guys are the same safety. Like Hubbard is going to be a box safety, right? Whereas you're looking at some of these others, like Ramsey's probably going to be a slot. So just because their position is listed as safety doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be like single high free safety. So,
yeah, feels like those are becoming more and more rare these days.
Yep. So, okay. And then today's Friday, right? Yeah. So I had to think of who am I messaging from all of these different podcasts that we do? Okay. So I just dropped that graphic for next week. So that's a good watch list. But JT, I'm also going to tell you, this is the deepest safety class that we've seen in a while.
Good.
I could give you 11 more that are going to all have draftable grades.
You know,
right.
It makes me really, really happy to hear you say that because, you know, these last few weeks doing corner and now tight end, those are probably my least 2 favorite positions to watch. And I really like safeties. So I'm really looking forward to this shift here.
Cool. So, yeah. So give those guys a watch. We'll podcast on them next Friday. So next Friday is what, the 19th? Yeah, so that's still a week before Christmas. And then we will be maybe having one more podcast after Christmas before we start doing mock draft Fridays. So,
Oh yeah, I watched your build a team exercise for the other day. That looked like a lot of fun. I want to dive into that at some point.
so I can tell you we do have some of those scheduled depending upon your availability to podcast on a weeknight. Right.
I can
So
be flexible.
cool. Well, yeah. So I'll invite you to the one that we're doing with Newton Owen. We've
Yeah,
got one scheduled.
as long as it's after like 8:30, I'm free and clear.
Yep, it'll be at 9 p.m. Eastern. Yeah.
Sweet.
Awesome. Well, JT, do you want to let everybody know kind of who you are, talk about your Bucks podcast and the writing that you do?
Yeah, so I cover the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for BucksReport.com, which is great because now we're starting to shift into draft mode after our playoff chances took a massive hit last night. So that combines my work here with draft professors every Friday night very seamlessly. Also do a Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast called the Creamsicle Chronicle podcast with fellow draft professor Andrew Harbaugh. And then you can find me goofing around, making random anime references on Twitter at Icewater Olson.
Cool. So I want to give a special shout out to JT. Just you've been coming on for what feels like the last 12 Fridays or so. I appreciate the time that you're putting into prepping for the podcast. You're creating really good content for Draft Professor and for yourself. So thank you so much. You can give the channel a follow at NFL Draft Fanatic, no I in Fanatic. And what you will get if you subscribe to Draft Professor on YouTube is, first of all, you will get the sincere appreciation for myself and the 110 people that are Draft Professor. You'll see about 30 of those 110 on podcasts every day of the week, weeknights at 7 p.m. and 9 p.m. Eastern. We have a show Saturday morning. We have 2 shows Sunday morning. Once the NFL season ends, we will also have a show on Sunday night. So we're here to cover the draft. You'll see us do mock drafts. You're going to see us talk about positions. One of the draft professors is even going to do scheme fits. So one week he's going to talk about the players that fit a Fangio defense. The next week he's going to do players that fit a Todd Bowles and Brian Flores defense. So that's what EJ is choosing to do with his podcast. So you will see the draft covered in a lot of different ways if you follow us and subscribe to our content. And it doesn't cost you a thing. So for JT, myself, and the 110 people at the Draft Professor, thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. And we will see you on a podcast again tomorrow morning. Thank you, everybody.